All right, guys. Welcome back to Real Talk. And we have Paul and Ben and Jack myself today. We
Hey,
hey, hope you guys have been staying happy, staying positive, and staying joyful this last few weeks. This the podcast we're going to focus on the topic of creation versus evolution, and something like a series that we're going to start on about more about the history of Christianity, how it started, and in the following podcast we'll be covering actual Christian life that people have been living that we find is a good role model. Um, yeah, so maybe we can, before we dive into that podcast topic, we can have a chat about how is everyone doing the week and if there's any topic they'd like us to share or discuss more. So Ben and Paul, maybe you can take the floor and tell us more about your week.
well, I for one, not as busy as you, Jack.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been all right. Feeling very rested. Kind of taking my time off month by month now. God's keeping me busy with a bunch of church ministries, but also just sort of giving me time to explore my own backyard because there's places that I've traveled to, despite being homegrown in Vancouver. There are areas that I've never even been to or have yet to visit in 15 plus years, and so kind of playing tourist in my own backyard. So yeah, just having fun. But I think when time comes, God calls me to work. I'm back at it. So yeah.
Hmm. Cool. What about yourself?
Well, I mean, there isn't really much to say from me. I've been just really busy with work, just as I've been for the last, I don't know, couple months. One thing that's kind of changed is, I guess, I have a little more free time right now. It's slowing down just a touch. So I've been starting to try to go exercise and stuff again. And I'm finding, I'm kind of enjoying that. Yeah, I didn't realize how much I missed just working out and just doing endurance things. And yeah, there isn't really much to say at
Did
all.
you say
So
you're working out, like you're back at the gym, or? Oh,
yeah,
shoot.
so the past I went like three
Yeah.
times, which is a lot for me and pretty unusual for me because yeah, I just usually have no time. But
Uh-huh.
um, I don't know. Lately, I've been feeling like I've been kind of reorganizing my life so that I just so I can kind of balance things out a bit more. And exercise just kind of fell into that, and it feels very natural, and I think it's like I like it that it's kind of worked out that way. So
That's good. That's
yeah,
really healthy.
yeah.
I'm glad we're
Hey, what would you?
for me, like, been busy with the move. Like, so official, like we're officially done. Like literally everything is done. It was quite a big move from one city to the other. But my week was pretty intense. Work crazy hours, and I'm starting to plan more and budget more. For finance and stuff. What else? Trying to get back on a healthy lifestyle as well. Trying to be more structured and things. So that's good. Uh, yeah. Basically, the title for our podcast is based on a movie that I watched off Netflix. It's called Matter of Faith. It was released in 2014, 2014. And basically, this movie is about Christianity of this girl who grew up in a Christian family, and she had to move to college, and she majors in biology. But the professor is a guy who's atheist and published a lot of research article about evolution and kind of disregarding Christianity in itself. So her dad actually found out that she was kind of like under this professor, and he was kind of didn't feel really right, and he wanted to talk to the professor more about his views and stuff. So long story short, he was dragged into a debate with the professor, and the debate was full on about why um, creation doesn't exist, because there's nothing to prove that God exists. It's all a matter of faith. Then God is not real, and everything just evolved through intelligence. Like the professor is saying that human came from monkeys because as technology improve, people become smarter, they live longer, they become more healthier, they can run faster than previous generations. And he was saying that we all came from monkeys and monkeys became smarter. And he was supporting the idea of that a chicken can never come out from a chicken, but rather of egg. And that was his debate, right? So what I really liked about that movie was the fact how this guy who came to know Rachel Wittico, and he kind of like helped her through her journey of finding the Christian faith again, because there's something he mentioned in that film that I really liked. He was saying that it's either you believe it wholeheartedly that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, or you don't. You can't be like lukewarm, either this or not, and that comment actually struck the chord with me, because in that film is real. It shows reality. She's turning into college life. There's parties, friends, boys night, girls night, and things, right? And things happen, and oftentimes if you grew up in a Christian family, you're gonna find yourself in places, not just in college but in work, where you're often tempted into a situation where you have to decide for yourself where exactly you stand as a Christian. Because it's not just in college, it could be in work when um people say stuff, and like you are a Christian, and it's a true living word, so it's not something that's like yadi dar in the air that you kind of half believe, half do not believe. Because if that's the case, it's really dangerous, because you're not really walking the walk of Christianity. I mean, somewhere along the line something happened, and it's good to be honest about it, and at least kind of acknowledge where it is, what actually caused that change. And another sentence he mentioned was that many times people like grew up in a Christian environment, and it's not a choice for them to be a Christian. It's a choice more of being additional. They were added to the Christian walk, Christian circle. So it comes a point of time you have to decide for yourself: is Christianity for you? Are you there just by addition, or are you there for submission? Because when you submit, it's like you're submitting to God, and everything like everything that God has for you would flow in your life, and you live a very joyous life. You live a life full of fruits. You'll be, there'll be just fruits of the spirit, fruit of good values. So I know I'm rambling on a little here, but that's how we decided to start this podcast. And sorry, Ben actually have a really good topic about the evolution versus creation um, pointer, so I'll let him talk more about that.
Do I?
Sorry, not Ben, Paul.
Thank you. I won't steal credit where credit's not due. But go ahead.
I guess what we should say first that Ben and I were not able to see the film because it's not available in Canada. And we tried looking around; it wasn't anywhere.
But Netflix, if you're tuning in, we are taking no profit from you guys. But if you happen to search through your category, we'd be happy to have you include that in the Canada library. Thanks.
Yeah, why is it available everywhere in the world except in Canada and the U.S., which is probably where it would be most, anyways. Yeah, I guess I think if we, well, I guess before we kind of get into that, I thought it would be kind of interesting if we each sort of kind of gave our own view of our own thoughts on creationism and evolution. Like what I don't know if you want to talk about your position, or maybe your own sort of significant experience. Like I guess for me, like I first, when I was like, I kind of grew up in church, right? But I didn't really know any, I was never really sort of serious about what I believed for a long time. When I was a kid, whatever, right? Like I didn't know whether I was a Buddhist or a Christian or what, right? Like, because nobody, like, people, like, our family didn't really take it seriously. Like, we went to Buddhist temples and stuff, and we did all that, and we also went to church, and I don't know what's going on, right? Like, But I remember like the first time I became aware that there was a difference between sort of the biblical sort of history and what science was teaching was like in grade 8, I think. And I realized that in science class they were teaching us that evolution is basically millions of years, and we came from not like particles or whatever. Um and then I realized the biblical narrative was different, right? Like we were created in 7 days, and that was the first time I kind of became aware that there was two different conflicting ideas, right? Or seemingly contradictory. I thought, oh, maybe I should look in the Bible, and if there is sort of a distinction, I should make a decision about what to do, right? Because I can only go for you can't really live with two different ideas. Yeah, and again, I don't even know why I thought that mattered, like because I didn't really take faith or anything really seriously. But I recall kind of reading the Genesis account, and then I kind of realized that the order of creation is actually kind of roughly parallels the evolution process. And at the time, that actually was enough for me. I thought, oh, okay, so maybe there is some kind of maybe it doesn't really conflict as much as it might seem, right? And now I'm at the point where I'm a little more open-minded, right? I don't see why the world what couldn't have been created, like like that, a lot of people, a lot of like culture kind of, and a lot of people around you say that, oh, how can you even think, be open to the idea of anything other than evolution? But I don't know. I just don't think. I just I'm not convinced that things are as concretely clear. The origin is as concretely established as as much as I think the world would like us to believe. Right? I just don't think it's there yet. Right? Like um, yeah. So that's kind of my sort of own experience.
Um, it's I don't know. I mean, when it came to creation and evolution, I really remember in biology 11, and my teacher, actually, my high school teacher, he's a Christian, and I knew that going into his class actually, so I thought it was interesting. And when it got to the topic of actually, I think I had him science 10 anyway. It got to a unit for evolution, and he was handing out worksheets, and he specifically said, and God bless his heart, he said, it says he said he had to teach this based on the curriculum, but he made a very very clear uh, point to the class and said he's not a proponent of this theory, but since he has to teach it as part of the curriculum, he can't go against the public education system, right? But he felt like as a Bible believing Christian, he had every obligation to declare his point of view, right? Or at least he felt the conviction to. So I thought that was very, respectable in his point, right? Um, in regards to actually our church, we're recently going through a series by Village Church by Pastor Mark Clark, and he talked about the problem of science and how there's such a black and white uh, argument about creationism versus evolution, right? And I think personally, as I was, like I said, I was younger. I thought that yes, when you're a Bible believing guy, evolution is completely just doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, the only thing, if we were to come out of monkeys and whatnot, that would explain why some other people are just so hairy out there. So there's just a bunch of that. I won't go into specifics, but you know who you are out there, as a joke. But yeah, I think now, as I got older and just do a lot more research, I won't say that there's a gray area, but I can see the fact that I think evolution in a very bizarre way actually plays in God's hand, right? Because if you look at even when you look at sort of the proof out there. In fact, if you look at the proof now, there's almost an argument that is that de-evolution, things are getting smaller. If you say that dinosaurs and mosquitoes were like super big back in like prehistoric times, why are they so small now? And equally as annoying, but there's the argument there, right? But I think for me, a lot of it has to do with understanding where God kind of fits that in the picture, right? I think I remember even watching a documentary that was, or at least a short little clip of Charles Darwin. He actually came from the church system, believe it or not, and he sat in the congregation thinking like, what on earth is all this? And then that's how the Darwinian evolution theory kind of came about, right? Because he couldn't accept things that were in the Bible that couldn't make sense, and so I guess that's where he came up with survival of the fittest. Only the best will live on forever, and so forth, right? But I like I said again, this is the kind of area that to me, I'm starting to understand that evolution, I think, is just a part of the creation story, as weird as it is, right? Because things get better, they don't get worse, right? I mean, we innately as people, we want things, we keep, that's why we have technology growing, that's why information is growing at an even more exponential and linear rate, right? Because that's just, we aim to do better, and that's how we survive, right? I mean, by me saying that, I'm not proposing the evolution, I'm not proposing that's evolution, but I'm proposing that we as as a society, we aim to do better, we aim to be better, right?
Beautiful. There's this topic as well, like throughout the debate. If you guys watch Matter of Faith, the movie, there was the actual debate where Mr. Whittaker was debating the professor. There was this topic that came up, and they're saying that okay, religion itself, like Christianity and all that, was created by men because men needed something, to govern them, to give them a sense of security, considering times of uncertainty, having someone like as a spiritual being to look out for them, to help to take away their worries and trouble is what was created in human in itself to like a mechanism, like a coping mechanism. So I also heard this like saying from people before, like, oh, religion is just man-made and everything, But in the debate itself, it was good because one of the ex-professor who used to work in the school, who was fired based on the fact that, in fact, his name is Professor Portland. He was fired because he had a strong faith that God actually exists, Jesus exists, and even though he taught biology, he knew with the fact that evolution is just something that science created. So, okay, moving on to what the debate was about. He mentioned the fact that if man wanted to create God, that would not be something that's right because look at modern day Christianity or modern day culture, popular culture, people always blame God for something that happens. Oh, a disaster happened is an act of God. Oh, this happened. Why God? Because you God. So the question is that if Christianity was created by humans, then the question is this: why would they create something that they hate so much? It doesn't really make sense. And why would people go out and sin so much and do so many evil things that would in the Bible be something that's a big no-no? Why would it create a religion that actually frowns upon themselves, their own evil nature, right? So it's just like a catch-22, which doesn't really quite make sense, So that topic was really heavily debated in that movie, in that film. So that was a good pointer, and there are other pointers as well. But I'll throw back the ball to you guys to talk.
You kind of reminded me of a film I actually just finished. I was watching an Interview with God. That's on Netflix, so thank you Netflix for putting that on Canadian side.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I guess we're turning this into movies and faith, which hopefully we'll go through a series of other podcasts. Anyway, I'm deviating here.
Well, there's a lot to talk about.
That's
I think
true.
it'd be interesting one day.
Yeah, if you guys want it, hey, we're all there, man. We can keep talking about this. I'm a big cinephile, so like big movie guy. Yeah, so I was saying that, I was watching. I finished the film Interview with God, and the one thing that that really stood out to me was kind of along the lines we were saying, Jack. How the question was that when they say, when the question comes to why do bad things happen to good people, the movie kind of had a moment where at least I was dissecting is that I think when this guy with the God character showed up talking to the interviewer, he said, people say this, but really what they mean is, why do bad things happen to a good person like me? That question really stems as its origin at that, because if say one of you, if Jack or Paul, something bad happens to you, then I will objectively say, okay, why do bad things happen to good guys like these guys? But I would then just kind of brush it off. But when it hits home to me, then I'm thinking, oh man, my life's a wreck. God doesn't exist. Why do I keep praying? What's the point in all of this, right? It's such a heavy thing. And I think going back to what you're saying is that it's not that people lose want to have something to have hope for. Well, not just the fact that they want to have something to hope for. I think the tangible thing is that they want to be able to find a way to not put God into the equation, but at the same time justify everything in their life by not having God. Our society itself, it's turned to a point where there's more, like you said, with the ability of technology, with information out there. And I think hopefully maybe Paul can briefly talk about this sort of modern day Tower of Babel situation, right?
There are two illustrations that I like that occurred to me. Yeah, and it was like once I was in a discussion with a pastor, and then I think I asked a question about what is the landing on Mars, the Mars rover, and and all those space explorations. Like, what is that? How does that sort of tie into the whole biblical narrative, right? And then he was basically saying, like many popular elements of science, it is basically sort of a modern Tower of Babel, right? Like, it's basically about man sort of asserting, just how high up they can go. Like, I mean, the Tower of Babel was about building, a tower that could reach heaven, right? And you basically put themselves beside God, right? And I think, or I believe it was in the book of Daniel, I don't remember exactly. And that was effectively what Satan declared, right? Like that was what made him Satan. The idea that he basically, what he said was, I am, and there's none beside me, right? Effectively saying that, he's even greater than God, right? The God isn't even beside him, right? And I think there's there's a like, I mean, I don't want to, I would never want to demonize science or modern progress, because I don't think that's not that is not at all the problem, right? Like, rather, like everything else in life, like things in art or in people being consumed by their career or by being consumed by their accomplishments, right? There's always a danger of pride, right? um, there's a danger of science being tainted by pride, and then us sort of using it as a vehicle to show just how accomplished we are, and how much we don't need God, right? We've done so much that God is just not necessary, right? So that was one illustration that he that pastor kind of shared with me, that really stuck with me.
I think that's why a lot of it is, there's a classic saying. It's a cliched saying. The like the greed of money is the root of all evil, which which is that saying isn't by accident. There's history, even there's a whole history behind that, right? But I think what an even deeper problem is that pride is actually essentially what turned Lucifer into Satan, right? Because if you look at the story of Lucifer, he was so proud. He was like the kick-ass angel. Like he knew that God needed him, and he was like basically on par with Michael. As far as I mean, I don't know the theological correctness.
Well, I think he was basically second to God.
Yeah, right. So so then basically, thanks. So and then what happened was he's like, I don't need men. Actually, these guys will be worshiping me. Why am I doing this, right? So then suddenly, that because of that pride, boom, he gets not just booted, sacked, turned into Satan. So I think pride is one of those things where it's such a thing in our lives now. And not just I'm not just talking about like your own personal pride, but even and all about self-expressionism and self, right? And there's so much self. It like self is consuming itself. I know it sounds profound, that you get to the point where you might not even have room for God, right? And so anyway, sorry, go on.
Well, actually, that's interesting that you would kind of take it in that direction, because like I mean, another illustration that it reminded me of was I guess before we kind of go into that illustration, um, I think we have to kind of understand that that there's a lot of philosophy behind a lot of modern ideas about science, and like evolution, and like I mean the way we're using science, like I mean, and much like the whole single use idea we were talking about last week, like you know um uh, uh, I mean the idea of sort of treating things with a disposable mindset, and the idea of sort of that we came from nothing, and that there was no driving force behind things, and that there is no real substance to anything we really do. Like I mean, we're effectively saying that everything is like in a sense is meaningless, right? Like yeah, that's sort of well, that's kind of the mantra of the modern world, right? Like underlying belief that everything is meaningless, and it's less about getting rid of God in a sense, and more about sort of freeing ourselves up, using science and using knowledge and all that. And well, that's the fascinating thing about the Book of Ecclesiastes, right? Like,
Everything is meaningless.
well, and that's what King Solomon basically says over and over. Like, and you kind of wonder why he says that, and then he explains why, because like he tells you that he wanted to experience everything, right? He wanted nothing to be restricted, right, for him, right? And the only way to do that is to convince yourself that everything is meaningless, right? um, because if you do are this or that, then there are no real legitimate restrictions. The problem, of course, was that he was successful. Like he convinced himself that everything is meaningless, and he didn't expect it to actually destroy him, right? The whole point of the book is sort of a cautionary tale, right? Like King Solomon was the wisest man to ever live, right? Like God officially declared that no one would be ever as wise as King Solomon, right? He granted him, a special measure of wisdom. Um, and the tragedy of the book is that his wisdom couldn't save him, right? Like, there's a lot to think about with this idea, like, and there's a lot to unpack with this.
This
Yeah,
ultimately jumps. I mean, this ultimately kind of gets into a big overlap of philosophy, because maybe the angle that maybe the three of us are attacking isn't quite creationism. In and of itself isn't quite evolution in itself, but sort of the philosophies behind the each Venn diagrams, and then the middle point in between it. Yeah, because we're not scholarly, we're not we're not paid theologians, but I think arguably every Christian out there is a theologian in and of themselves, because uh, they have a unique walk with God that's only designed that way, which is also a beautiful thing, because I wouldn't want Jack or Paul's type of similar walk, and I'm sure as heck they don't want my kind of walk, because it's probably gonna be too weird for them too, right? So um, yeah, I think there's as Paul mentioned, how there's a bigger thing to unpack here, which we can probably cover in the few other sessions when we're more I don't remember.
No, actually, I want to say something. You
Oh,
don't mind
go
me
ahead.
cutting in.
Yeah.
Um, while you guys are talking about ecclesiastics, I was actually looking through the Bible and trying to get a better like understanding about the references that you guys were bringing up. But it got me thinking as well. Like now, in society, it comes to a point that it feels like society is coming to the point that they really kind of maxed out everything, maxed out immediate pleasures, maxed out immediate success, maxed out everything, immediate self gratification. So then it comes to saying that does that mean that society now is on the brink of where it's going to collapse? Because after a while, when especially like in the Bible, it shows that at the end of it, he realized this were all meaningless. Chasing after this and that and everything gives him no joy, no peace, no happiness. In fact, he just felt really empty, right? And then, in other words, my saying then is that if you're a Christian and then you actually read the Bible, would you still want to go out and sin, to do all this stuff, knowing the fact that after the end of your so-called chasing, you realize it gives you nothing, right? In fact, it makes you more empty and more dry, which is also like I'm just going a bit off tangent here again, like I usually do. But like in most dating shows, like reality TV shows now, um, they show that people are like, oh, trying this, trying that, and everything, and then at the end of it, they're just empty and really dry, and just watching it feels really yucky to watch this kind of programs that's airing like national TV shows. But my question is that when will society come to a point that they will actually acknowledge God? You know, since now it seems like this is the point where society is currently at. So I'm really just kind of intrigued, like what will actually happen in the next phase of society. Would it be a point where people start to realize that hey, you know, God is actually the one that has been there all the time.
The
You
one
know,
thing that
so I don't know, but yeah.
I have to process this because watching my own parents who are not believers, and I'm hoping that one day that my family themselves will come to believe too. But and I'm speaking this more on a more personal level because uh, and I've shared this with a few others that God, the beauty of what God does, it's just man, my brain's like too finite and too stupid to figure it out. But getting a taste of it, it's insane to think that God gave us the idea of free will because, and the reason why I'm bringing this up because it's like you're saying, society and the way that God has designed everyone's life is that every person in their life, whether in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, I'd say hell, even in their 80s, okay, there's a junction and a time in life that God says, okay, they give him a fork in the road. It says, okay, you can either walk with me or you can be of the world. You can't have both. And this is why exactly in Revelation they talk about the lukewarmness where, and I think, Jesus talks about spitting the person out because it's like, I don't even know you, right? And I think this is exactly the sort of fork in the road that, we individually and then society as a whole, they say, okay, are you going to acknowledge, admit that, and submit yourselves to, to God, or turn away all completely and then maybe live with those consequences then, right? I firmly believe that every person out there has a junction that God has given them. It says, okay, you give them a choice to either believe or not, right? Recognizing the existence, God's existence, I think people are starting to be aware that okay, there's this idea of God. Okay, there's no arguing there. But the fact that God came in flesh, God in three person, the Holy Trinity, that's where they kind of draw lines. As okay, you guys are bonkers, bananas. I don't need this, right? And so going with what you're saying, Jack, I firmly believe that God has given every person in this universe out there a fork in the road whether to walk with them. Because I mean, the saying goes, it's easy to start as a Christian, but can you say that you go to the deathbed being a Christian?
Which also why, like I'm thinking, right? Of all the religions out there, right? If you ask someone, "Oh, are you a Christian?" or something, they usually will go like, yeah, I grew up in a Christian family, but no." And this most of them usually actually attend church on a Sunday. So then my question that I'm begging to differ is that I believe the viewers can acknowledge to this as well. Like you guys might have some Muslims or Islamic friends, and when you ask them, "Are you a Muslim?" They'll look you in the eye and tell you like, Allah is the only true God and stuff like that. So they'll say it with through determination and pride, and they actually internalize this belief, right? Which I'm saying that it gets me thinking, like, why is it that their religion is one of the religion that they're able to internalize and actually say it with dignity and pride, and most Christians, they don't dare to be rooted in their belief. And when someone say I'm a Christian or something, it usually comes up with a um, bad social attachment that comes with the relationship, or or they have to justify, like, why I'm a Christian. They're like, oh, I'm a Christian, but I'm actually having a relationship with God, so I'm not a true religious Christian. So it comes up with a whole baggage of like explanation why. The question is why. All right, so that's something that gets me like wondering as well, and I believe like the viewers have thoughts as well. So yeah, just something that I've always thought about. Like, why can't Christians be bold? Like, what has changed, or what has society changed, or was there, you know which then again, many people would say that, oh, Christian, they persecute people, they do this, they do that, and things. But that's, yeah, that's a whole another podcast for another day. But yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I know we got a little bit off topic, but maybe we'll try and gather some thoughts, or even pick a different topic. Again, if you guys are out there listening and have topics you want to discuss, yeah, we can totally bring those on the table. It makes our job a lot easier, so we don't have to lose our hair trying to figure out what to talk about. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. This is Ben signing out. Paul,
And
Uh,
Jack.
stay frosty, you
We'll
guys.
catch you on the flip side, guys.
see you later.
See y'all. Bye.